Hello. Welcome to the midnight sermon. I think it is midnight, actually. Near enough. I want us to think, just briefly, for a few moments, about an aspect of the Christmas story. Now, in the Brick Church I'm in, we've been looking at two pregnancies and two songs. And it's been quite a mystical conversation, really, that we've been having. And it's been fascinating to hear it again. So I'm going to read it. So bear with it. It's a relatively long reading. You know, in churches often we'll only read a couple of verses and then we'll behave like, well, that's enough. But actually there's a big chunk to be read here. So let's hear this. Hear this story as it's meant to be heard in its almost entirety. This is from Luke chapter 1. From verse 57. When Elizabeth was full term in her pregnancy, she bore a son. Her neighbours and relatives, seeing that God had overwhelmed her with mercy, celebrated with her. On the 8th day they came to circumcise the child and were calling him Zachariah, after his father. But his mother intervened. No, he is to be called John. But they said, no one in your family is named after that. And they used sign language to ask Zachariah what he wanted him to be named. Asking for a tablet to write on, Zachariah wrote, his name is to be John. And that took everyone by surprise, and surprise followed surprise. Zachariah's mouth was now open, his tongue loose, and he was talking, praising God. A deep, reverential fear settled over the neighbourhood, and in all that Judean hill country, people talked about nothing else. Everyone who heard about it took it to heart, wondering, what will become of this child? Clearly, God has his hand in this. Then Zachariah was filled with the Holy Spirit, and he prophesied. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel. He came and set his people free. He set the power of salvation in the centre of our lives and in the very house of David his servant, just as he promised long ago. Deliverance from our enemies and every hateful hand. Mercy to our parents as he remembered to do what he said he'd do. What he swore to Abraham and Sarah, a clean rescue from the enemy camp, so we can worship him without a care in the world, made holy before him as long as we live. And you, my child, prophet of the highest, will go ahead of the Master to prepare his ways, present the offer of salvation to his people, the forgiveness of their sins. Through the heartfelt mercies of our God, God's sunrise will break in upon us, shining on those in the darkness, those sitting in the shadow of death, then showing us the way, 1 foot at a time, down the path of peace. The child grew up healthy and spirited. He lived out in the desert until the day he made his prophetic debut in Israel. How good is that? John the Baptist, who is what this is talking about, if you remember the story before this moment, Zachariah had been in the temple in the darkness where the candles or the oil lamps were glowing, and the shining of bronze and gold and silver and the tapestries and the smoke and the scent of decades of prayer hung heavy in the air. Zachariah was chosen by Lot to go in and light the incense on this one day, the one day in his life he ever gets to do this. And in a sense, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But on another hand, countless priests before Zachariah had done the same thing. You go in, you light the candle, you feel honoured. But this day was to be different because Zachariah encounters An angel of the Lord who says, well, hang on a minute, Zechariah. Your wife will become pregnant. She will bear a son. And he will be the forerunner. He will announce the Messiah. And Zechariah's like, ugh! I mean, I know you're an angel and everything, but come on, look at the age, look at my age, look at her age. There's nothing going on here. But John the Baptist, who is this son, marks the reset that is about to happen. The preparation in God's story, not Zechariah's story, not Elizabeth's story, not anyone's story, but God's story. The reset is about to begin. And Mary knew, Elizabeth's cousin, knew what was coming. Her song, if you know the Magnificat that we call it sometimes, the Song of Mary, it's a prelude to the Beatitudes that Jesus would speak 30 years later. So here's Mary, his mother, speaking the words, pre-echoing the words that the Messiah is going to speak. And when Mary sings out her Magnificat in Luke chapter 1, she speaks of the goodness of God, the recognition and the importance of Mary and women and all people who get ignored, the recognition of their importance, the scattering of the proud, the bringing down of political and military powers, the lifting up of the least important, the hungry being fed and the rich leaving with empty hands. Mary knew the score. Now, if you remember the story, if you know the story, Zechariah didn't believe the angel. When the angel speaks to him, he's like, come on. And Zechariah is struck silent. He is unable to speak. When he comes out from the temple, everyone looks at him, he's like, and they know something's happened. They know he's had some kind of encounter. But he can't speak. The priest, the one who is meant to have the words of God, the one who undertakes the actions of God, is silent. And Elizabeth births this child. Elizabeth says his name is John. And only then, when Elizabeth has spoken and acted for God, only then does the priest, the hierarchy, the patriarchy, only then does Zechariah speak. Now, this isn't a threat to us men. This is liberation. This is freedom. This is the women that we love being released from oppression. This is us discovering that God's kingdom has us all standing shoulder to shoulder to bring it in. It's not up to us to be strong, to be masculine, to be manly. It never was. Men of power historically have wrestled the story from everyone's hands. Men who sought to own and control rewrote the story to benefit and to protect themselves. And here's the first. Well, it's not quite the first, but here's one of the plot twists. Because these men through history, they didn't do it for the benefit of all men. They did it for themselves, for their own interests. Because the rich and the powerful have never been on the side of the poor or the unimportant. Despite what they say, they are only interested in what can benefit them. The sweat of the brow of the peasant through history, the life of the slave, the rich land of the colonized country. That's what they're really interested in. Listen to the words of Mary. Listen to the words of Jesus when they talk about the great reset that is happening. Because when they speak, the poor aren't pulled down. The refugee isn't sent home. The women aren't put back into domesticity. The unemployed aren't told to get a job. Those who are sick aren't told, "You're not getting any pip. Get to work." Listen to what shifts when Mary and Jesus speak. Because Zechariah was silent. And whilst he was silent, Mary and Elizabeth sang out. And they sang out with blessings and the announcement of a new era that was coming in. Over the season, I've been drawn into this idea of the Great Reset. And another picture, if you like, if you don't like the idea of a reboot, is of a rewilding of our faith. Elizabeth brings it to birth in John, and really, thinking about it, you can't get much more wild than giving birth to another life. How wild is that? Wild in every way. The pain and the agony and the joy and the life. Something that never even existed. You can't get wilder than that. Elizabeth brings this to birth. And this child later becomes known as John. He becomes nicknamed John the Baptizer. And at the start, we know things are shifting very much because of that name change that happens. It's no longer the family name. He's no longer continuing the old ways, perpetuating the old narrative, the old curse, because things are about to be reset. The carefully maintained garden of religion is about to get wild because John has arrived. The Spirit of God is about to start breaking out all over the place. John was not a family name for Zechariah and Elizabeth. Because the pattern is broken, something new is about to begin. Now, for those of us that like new stuff, this is exciting. We like this. This is good. I'm bored with the old stuff. For those of us that like things to be comfortable, who like to know what's going on, who like to know, well, this is what's going to happen next, well, we're not so sure about this. But the new way is actually difficult for all of us because we have to live differently. We have to relate to God differently. The certainties have gone. And of that, you can be sure. The new certainties, because there's always new ones, will take some getting used to. Because the people that we think we're meant to be like, the rich and the powerful and the successful, those in the big jackets, those with the nice cars, with the good bank balances, with the house on the beach. The beautiful people, the successful people, whether that's in the Christian world or elsewhere. These are the people we're meant to be like. Well, they're shown to be lacking. They're shown up for what they are. And when we lose that, these certainties of what we're meant to be like, well, we lose our anchor. And when we lose our anchor, we start to see that what is inside is more important. We start to see that what is eternal is more important than what is now. That relationships are more important than things. That faith is more important than religion. That Jesus is more important than our church traditions. Because the wild is breaking back in. The safe ways of doing things no longer seem to be as useful as they once were. Zechariah, silent until now. Finally, he speaks. Because now it's begun. Now he's allowed to speak. Because the reboot has begun, he's allowed back in. He doubted. He thought things would never change. In fact, he didn't think anything needed to change. Everything's fine. Why rock the boat? It's all okay. So God says, you shush for a moment while I sort this out. We don't want Zechariah piping up with all of his negativity and all of his, well, this is fine, isn't it? Because the reset is coming. But once it happens, Zechariah bursts into song. And what a song he sings. Because he sings of promise and of hope and of salvation. He sings of mercy, of rescue, of the end of fear. He sings of holiness and goodness. Wouldn't it be great if we could sing that song too? Wouldn't it be great if we believed our world was being reset to that language? Well, here's the good news. Because we can sing that song. I can. You can. In fact, it's already started. It's not finished. Oh, no. Not by a long shot. But it has already started. Now, you may think I'm talking nonsense. Think what you like. I don't care, because I don't know. I don't think I am. Because if you don't think it started, if you don't think the reset has begun, then you haven't heard the song properly. You may need to go into the temple and meet with an angel. I don't know. Maybe you need to listen to those songs sung by those who do get it. And the people singing those songs might not be the ones you expect. Not the shiny, successful, I've got my life all together, here I am with my guitar singing down a microphone to a large crowd kind of a people. I've got a job and a career and a mansion and everyone hangs on every word I say kind of a people. I'm not saying they're wrong. But perhaps the people singing the song that God wants us to hear aren't the people we expect. Listen carefully, and you will hear, you will know that the reset has begun. In the Song of Mary, and just before that, in the song or the Beatitude of Elizabeth, you will see it lived, sung in the story of Jesus. Get in on it before it passes you by. If necessary, and this is certainly true of me, sometimes you have to shut up and listen. You may have to do that quite often. Just shut up and listen for a while. Listen to the voice of God sung by other people, and then reconsider my attitudes and my thoughts and my preferences and my opinions on how things should be done, or how God is, or what really the world is about. Sometimes I need to shut up and listen. And when I do, I think I can hear the garden rewilding, the roots creaking through the concrete foundations, the vines creeping up the sides of the walls, the mushrooms gently pushing their way through the tarmac. Let's listen again to a Zechariah song, because it's good. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel. He came and set his people free. He set the power of salvation in the center of our lives and in the very house of David, his servant, just as he promised long ago through the preaching of his holy prophets, deliverance from our enemies, from every hateful hand, mercy to our parents as he remembers to do what he said he'd do, what he swore to Abraham and Sarah, a clean rescue from the enemy camp, so we can worship him without a care in the world, made holy before him as long as we live. And you, my child, prophet of the highest, will go ahead of the Master to prepare his ways. Present the offer of salvation to his people, the forgiveness of their sins, and through the heartfelt promises of God, God's sunrise will break upon us, shining on those in darkness, those sitting in the shadow of death, then showing us the way 1 foot at a time down the path of peace. You. Not just John. I like John. I'm a big fan of John. But not just John. You. I may not even be a fan of you, but you. Yes, John kicked it off. Good stuff. But what if we, what are we if we, you and me, are not? What are we if we are not the new John the Baptizer? What are we if we are not heralds of this new kingdom? Because John wasn't sent to tell everyone off, and neither are we. A church, a faith that requires us to tell everyone they're sinners and somehow condemned isn't the one we find in the Bible. Whatever others people may tell you, that is not the good news that you are a miserable sinner. The message in the Bible is of sins forgiven, of people restored, of life returned. Because the curse is lifted, the curse on me and the curse on you and the curse on the world around us. And whether you believe that as a literal thing from the story of Adam and Eve or as a metaphor for the frailty of human beings, it doesn't matter, because the fact is, it is no more. If you will hear the song. So sing it, say it, live it, love it. We are to continue to make sure it keeps going, to resist the default, resist going back to the old ways of fear and of doubt and of judgment. Reset the old you with your guilt, because the script has been torn up. It's a new chapter. We have a new language now that we speak. Not the old church or the old ways. We have a new language. We use new words now. We use hope and trust and joy, restoration, recklessness, generosity, grace. These are the words that are now in our vocabulary. John marked the end of the Old Testament. The last of the Old Testament prophets, some people say. Malachi, with his saving power of God arising on us, he gave us a heads up, didn't he? Joel, with his old people dreaming dreams and his young people having visions. Micah and our evil being taken and thrown into the deepest sea where we will never, ever see it again. This is what the Old Testament prophets worked towards, this new beginning. And all of us carry this message. Because this message carried through from the Old Testament prophets through to Jesus, through to us. Because God tried, didn't he? He tried in the Old Testament. Here's the Garden of Eden. That hasn't worked out. Get out the garden. Get out a minute. Let's try again. That didn't work, did it? And then God says, well, all right, here's the land you can live in. Let's see how you get on. Oh, that didn't work. Well, I'll give you a king. See if the king helps you kind of stay on track. No, that didn't work, did it? Well, I'll send you some prophets. Oh, no. Well, that didn't work. So in the end, God says, to be blunt, I'll do it my bloody self then. And God came down in the person of Jesus and said, here I am. Here's how to live. Here's how we can be. Here's how we can speak. Here is the language of my kingdom. All of us carry those words now. John and Zach and Elizabeth and David and Rachel and Ruth and Sarah and Esther and whatever your name is. You carry it too. All of us are now part of the great reset. So start that reset now. Reset it in you and encourage and allow it in others around you. Let them change. Believe that you can change and believe that they can change, because the curse is reversed. The old words are gone, putting you down, telling you that you aren't of any use or of any value, that you won't amount to much, or telling you that the world's crap, what's the point, everything's terrible. It's gone. Because Jesus is here. We're in a new era. And whether you're 20 years old or 80 years old or anywhere around that, the reset is about to happen again. And this is why, as followers of Jesus, the calendar of the year is important, because we forget, don't we? We get into January and February, and then we do Easter, and then our summer holidays, and it just rolls on. And then we get back to Christmas, and at Christmas again, God reminds us, don't you forget that I am with you. Because we have forgotten, and we have forgotten, yeah. And God says again, do you remember how 2,000 years ago we said, let's start again, and I will walk alongside you? And it's like, I'd forgotten. And we start again. The reset began then, and it happens afresh every year when we remind ourselves, every month, every day, when we remind ourselves that God is with us. Jesus is here. The new kingdom has started. Whatever's going on around us, in our hearts and in our street and in our nation and in our world, do what you want. But the kingdom is here. 2,000 years. Okay, it's taken a while rolling out. I'll give it that. But it is still rolling out through people like you and through people like me, through places like this and places like wherever you are. The resistance is ongoing, and we won't give up until love finally wins. And it will. So happy Christmas, and God bless. And hopefully, I will see you soon. Bye-bye.